$381,000. That was the number in Siddharth Kulkarni's account on a Tuesday afternoon in November 2021, when he turned the phone screen toward his wife and watched her face change. She laughed. He laughed. Their daughter, 8 months old and a bouncer on the kitchen floor, did not understand what was happening, but laughed too, because her parents were laughing. That was the highest the number ever went. 6 months later, a different Tuesday, his wife Priya sitting alone at the kitchen table before he woke up, reading margin reports on her laptop with a cup of chai going cold beside her, reading through liquidation notices and bank transfer confirmation she had not known existed. 6 months of them, not crying, not calling for him, just reading. The way a person reads something they already suspected was true and were hoping they were wrong about. Siddharth was still asleep. That is the distance between those 2 Tuesdays. Everything that happened in between is what this story is about. Siddharth grew up in Pune, in a housing society near Kothrud, where every family on the floor had roughly the same income and the same unspoken agreement not to talk about it. His father worked in municipal infrastructure. His mother taught at a primary school 2 kilometers from home. There was nothing wrong with the life they had. But Siddharth grew up watching his parents count carefully before every purchase, and that counting left something in him he could not name until much later. Not resentment, a wish to be the kind of person who did not have to count. He studied engineering, then spent 6 years at a software firm in Hinjewadi writing back-end systems for financial applications. Stable work, decent salary. He married Priya in early 2019. Their daughter arrived in early 2021, the same year the crypto market began moving in a direction that seemed, to a man with savings and a spreadsheet brain, like something worth paying attention to. He opened a futures account in March of that year with $5,000. He understood leverage. He understood the mechanics. What he did not understand was the difference between understanding the mechanics and being protected by that understanding. The first 3 trades were correct. The account moved from $5,000 to $11,000. He told nobody. In October, it crossed $200,000. By November, it was above $300,000. Every morning, he opened the app before Priya was awake and watched the number and felt something he had been waiting his whole life to feel. Not relief, the feeling of being the kind of person who did not have to count anymore. The Tuesday, he showed Priya the screen. That was the moment the feeling had a witness. And once it had a witness, he could not let the witness see it go. He did not know yet that the market never confirms anyone forever. December 2021, Bitcoin dropped 40% in 3 weeks. Siddharth had positions open at 15 times leverage. The first liquidation took $60,000 in an afternoon. He sat in the home office with the baby monitor on the shelf and looked at the number for a long time. Priya called from the kitchen to ask if he wanted dinner. He said he was coming. He did not tell her about the $60,000, because $60,000 felt like a temporary problem. He had built the account from $5,000 to $381,000. He could build it back. He needed 1 good week. He had had many good weeks. The next morning, he entered a position 3 times larger than anything before. Not because there was a clear signal, because it needed to be large enough to recover what was lost in a single move. That was not strategy. That was the first revenge trade. January 2022. Tuesday, minus 12,000. Thursday, minus 9. The following Monday, minus 22. He stopped adding the numbers together. Adding them made a total, and a total was something he would have to face. He restructured the days instead. At the screen by 5:45 before Priya was up. Lunch at the desk. Evenings at the table, but not fully at the table. When Priya mentioned he was always looking at his phone, he said there was a project deadline at work. By then, the lies had stopped feeling like lies. They felt like maintenance. Small repairs to keep the surface of the life intact while he found his way back. In February, Priya's father asked about the house they had been discussing. Siddharth said they were still looking at options. That night he lay in the dark and calculated what it would take to get back to the level where the house conversation could happen without explanation. March. A position he had held for 11 days reversed overnight. He was awake when it happened. 2:40 in the morning. His hand moved toward the close button and stayed there for 4 seconds. Then he added to the position instead. Closing it, locked in the loss. Adding kept open the possibility that the loss was not yet real. The position was liquidated by morning. Priya came to the office doorway at 7 with the baby on her hip. She looked at him. He said he had not slept well. Her eyes went to the screen, then back. She shifted the baby to her other hip and walked back to the kitchen. That was the moment she was closest to knowing, and the moment he was furthest from telling her. Through April and May, the account bled in the same pattern. Each session, the one that would begin the recovery, each recovery failed before it started. One afternoon, their daughter pulled herself to standing for the first time, holding the edge of the coffee table. Priya called for him to come and see. He stood in the doorway and watched. Their daughter looked at him and smiled. He went back to the desk. The market closed 4 hours later. He could not remember afterward which way it had closed. The account reached 0 on a Sunday evening in late May. The screen showed a balance of 0 and the word liquidated in the position history. He sat with that for 20 minutes. Then he applied for a personal loan. The loan arrived in June. He traded it into the account. He lost half in the first 2 weeks. Priya did not know about the loan. She did not know about the 0. She did not know about the 60,000 in December or the months of loss between. She knew her husband had been distracted, that the house conversation had stalled, that something in him had gone quiet in a way she had not seen before. She knew there was a shape to the silence. She did not yet know its dimensions. He went to work. He came home. He ate dinner. He lay awake next to Priya and calculated the sequence of moves that would bring everything back before she would ever need to know it had been somewhere else. One evening, in early July, she sat beside him on the couch after the baby was asleep. She put her hand on his arm and asked if something was wrong. Not with work. With him. He looked at her and said everything was fine. Just tired. The project at work had been long. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded and went to make tea. He sat on the couch and thought about calling her back. He thought about what her face would do when she heard the number. He thought about the loan, about her parents in the house. He did not call her back. In August, a credit card statement arrived that Priya opened because it was addressed to the household. Transfer fees, platform fees, names she had never heard. She put it on the office desk without saying anything and went to give the baby a bath. When he came home, he saw it. He moved it to the bottom of a stack of papers. He said nothing at dinner. That evening, Priya came to the office doorway to say goodnight, looked at him at the desk, and turned off the corridor light behind her without a word. That was the Tuesday before the other Tuesday. The following Monday, she woke before he did. She made chai, sat at the kitchen table, opened her laptop. She searched the platform name she had not recognized. Then she went further back than she had looked before. She was still at the table when he came downstairs. He saw the laptop first, then her face. She asked one question. How long? He said since December. Not the full truth. But December was the word that came out. Then she asked about the loan. He said yes. She closed the laptop. Their daughter started crying from the other room. Priya stood up and went to get her. She did not look at him as she passed. He sat at the kitchen table alone. From the other room, he heard her speaking to the baby in the low morning voice, the ordinary voice she used when everything was normal. He sat with the chai going cold in front of him and understood that the thing he had been most afraid of was not the debt. It was this, the sound of ordinary life continuing in the other room while he sat with the full weight of what he had kept from the person who had trusted him with everything. He had been more afraid of being seen as a failure than of actually failing. That had been true from the first lie in December. It had cost him more than the leverage ever had. 8 months after that morning, I met him on the terrace of a small restaurant near Pune in Pune. He arrived before me and was standing at the railing, looking out over the road below. He turned when he heard the door. He looked like someone who had been sleeping properly for the first time in a long time. We sat down. I said, "Thank you for agreeing to meet."
I almost did not come. I have been trying to work out which parts of this story belong to me and which parts belong to Priya.
I asked. Before the first liquidation, before the first lie, what were you actually trading for? He was quiet. His hands were flat on the table.
I told myself I was trading for the house, for security, for Priya and the baby. Those things were real, but underneath them was something I did not name until much later. The account was the one place I was not the person who counted before spending.
He looked at the table.
Every time the number went up, it was proof I had escaped something. When it started going down, I was not losing money. I was losing the escape. And once I understood that, I could not stop. Because stopping meant admitting the escape had never been real.
A motorbike passed below. The terrace went quiet again. I asked, what was the earliest sign you ignored?
The night of the first liquidation. I sat in the office for 40 minutes, deciding whether to tell Priya. I decided not to because I told myself it was temporary. But that was not the real reason.
He stopped. The afternoon light on the terrace had shifted.
In November, she had looked at the screen and laughed. I needed that to be the last thing she had seen. That was the night I chose the story over the marriage. I did not know that was what I was choosing. But that was the choice.
He looked out over the railing for a moment, then back. I asked, if someone is sitting right now where you were in December, what would you say to them? He was quiet for a moment.
I would ask what they are more afraid of. Losing the money or losing the version of themselves the money was proving. Because if the answer is the second one, the money is already gone. They are just waiting for the account to catch up.
Outside, the road below kept moving.
And every day they wait, they are spending something that costs more than any leverage. They are spending the trust of someone who has not been told they are already inside the risk. Tell them early, whatever the number is. The number is never the thing that breaks a marriage. The silence around the number is.
I stood up. Before I turned, I looked at him once, and I nodded, just once. He saw it. Something moved across his face. Briefly, then gone. He was still at the table when I reached the stairs. I did not look back. The loan is being repaid in installments. The trading account is closed. Both of them closed it together one evening in August, sitting side by side at the kitchen table, in the same chairs where the other conversation had happened. That was Priya's condition, not as punishment, as the only way she could imagine the next part starting. Siddharth still works at the software firm in Hinjewadi. Some mornings he passes a billboard for a crypto exchange and does not look at it. Some mornings he does look. The looking lasts a little less time than it used to. Priya went back to work in September. She told him she wanted her own income. He did not ask her to explain. Their daughter is 1.5 years now. She has learned to run. She runs between rooms and tips over things and laughs when they right themselves. Some evenings after she is asleep, Siddharth and Priya sit at the kitchen table and talk about ordinary things. He does not check his phone during those conversations. He used to always be checking his phone. That has changed. Not everything has, but that has. Siddharth Kulkarni did not lose his marriage, because he lost the money. He lost the ground beneath it because he chose, every day for 6 months, to protect the story over the person. That is the debt that has no fixed repayment schedule. And the only currency that counts toward it is the kind he had been spending on silence. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who is still waiting for the right moment to say the true thing. Subscribe to Wealth Paradox Global for more stories like this one, like this video, if you recognize the silence in Siddharth's story. And leave a comment. What have you been protecting that the person next to you does not know they are already inside? And I am Maya V. Wealth, the host of Wealth Paradox Global.